Peace and love. Welcome back, everybody. Thank y'all for being here. And tonight is going to be one of those conversations people talk about long after it ends. And we stepping directly into one of the most controversial debates of our time, which is the moon landings. And it's not just about space, it's not just about science, it's about trust, perception, and what we're being told is real. The moon, the moon mission in question is the recent one, Artemis II, and this was a program being presented as humanity's return to the moon. But for many, this isn't a celebration; it's a red flag, and I see a lot of people asking questions. And because the same questions that have followed NASA for decades are now louder than ever, if you ask me, with this recent trip. Questions about technology, footage, physics, and whether what we're seeing lines up with what we're being told. So tonight, we're not avoiding those questions, and we're bringing on a man who has spent years challenging the official narrative, a filmmaker, an investigator who has built his reputation on digging into the moon landing story and beyond. Some call him controversial, others call him necessary, which is what I call him. But one thing is certain, though, he's not afraid to say what most people won't say. And tonight he's here to break down why he believes the Artemis mission doesn't add up and to present his case directly to you. So this is not about telling you what to think. It's not about putting the arguments on the table. Excuse me. It's about putting the arguments on the table and letting you decide, people. So whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, I want y'all to lock in with us today because this is going to be one of those conversations. So with no further ado, let's bring in Bart Sibrel.
How's it going?
It's going pretty good. It's good to have you back, Bart. I appreciate you.
No problem.
So what do you think about this entire Artemis trip? I was on your channel prowling around and I was just soaking up all the arguments you was presenting about the shadow locations and stuff like that. I don't know if you have any if you prepared to present any slides or if you can just verbally go into that. I wanted to start right off with something concrete, and I think that when I saw you going over how the shadows, um, the angles of the shadows being inconsistent with reality, I thought that that was something that was like undeniable proof. So I got a couple of them that I think are just those undeniable arguments, and that was the first one. If you wanted to go in there.
Sure. It's interesting. You say and I say undeniable, but people still deny it anyway. you
Now
know,
that's
I
crazy.
talked to a I talked to a college professor at a major university, and he said even if an Apollo astronaut went on national TV and said the moon missions were fake, he'd still think he walked on the moon anyway. That he will not recant the glorious moon landings, which they've made a god out of, literally. If you don't believe in God, chances are, quote, science, whatever that is your God. And the God of science is putting a man on the moon. The issue about Artemis isn't really Artemis. The issue about Artemis is Apollo. Even if Artemis did what they claim to have done, it proves they did not go to the moon. Now, I'm going to bring up my screen and talk some of those. I'm sending you, it says a request to share my screen.
There you go.
And you, let me hit, okay, continue. I'm going to go ahead and share. Let's see, this one, background over the shoulder, side by side. Content only. I've got three monitors here. Let me make sure I pick the right one. I guess it's this one. Share. Let me double check. You're seeing my logo, right?
I'm seeing your face again. You're sharing your Zoom call meeting, I think.
Oh, okay. Let me see which one here. Let me try again. Go to stop sharing. I've got three monitors, so I'm trying to make sure I
It's
share the right one here. Okay, share. And I guess this one, desktop one. There we go. Share. Okay. So now you're seeing my logo,
Yep,
correct?
we seen your logo.
Okay. So let's talk about why Artemis proves that they did not go to the moon, even if Artemis did what they claim to have done, which I gave them the benefit of the doubt at first, but it looks like they probably did not leave Earth orbit either. The thing is, Artemis had to leave Earth orbit. If they didn't, it would prove that the 1969 moon landing claims were false. So they had to leave Earth orbit. If they admitted they can't leave Earth orbit, then how could they possibly go to the moon in 1969?
Mhm.
So of course there's a number of problems from leaving Earth orbit. Do they have enough fuel? And greater still, the lethal radiation that they admit is an obstacle. First of all, let's look at this picture here. And even if Artemis did what they claim to have done, and it looks like I can move this over here. Um, this is the normal progress of technology. Okay, so here's first flight. It's a kite airplane. It took them multiple attempts to get off the ground. And in 1903, they flew 37 yards and their top speed was 7 miles per hour. 49 years later, you have jets flying 2,000 miles on one tank of fuel at 500 miles per hour. Bottom left, you've got in 1971 them allegedly driving cars on the moon. The smartest AI in the world said that that picture we're looking at in the bottom left is fake. It said that this mountaintop is a fake backdrop and that this astronaut is actually a doll on a remote controlled moon rover toy, and
Wow.
they miniaturized everything so that they could have a larger background and make the background look bigger. But in any case, they're claiming they were able to drive cars on the moon on the first attempt with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone. Okay. After they put one person in space in 1961, didn't even do an orbit. He just went from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, stayed in space for a whopping 15 minutes. Only one astronaut NASA had put in space. They set an 8 year goal to go 1,000 times farther than the space station, orbit the moon at 3,000 miles per hour, undock from that spacecraft, and land a rocket vertically down to 0 miles per hour. Okay. Now, with 5 decades better technology and 10 million times more computing power, the first time Elon Musk trying to land a rocket vertically, it blew up. Second time, it blew up. Third time, it blew up. The fourth time, it blew up. So, with 5 decades better technology and 10 million times more computing power, it took Elon Musk 5 tries to land a rocket vertically, which they claim they did 6 times in a row. Okay. And now, fast forward 55 years later, lower right hand picture, and the best they can do is look out the window at the moon going by. What that means is they're claiming there's greater technology in the past than in the future. But that's a historic and scientific impossibility. Kite brother or the Wright brothers kite airplane, 49 years later we have jets. So if they could go to the moon in that picture there and drive cars and play golf on the moon on the first attempt, keep in mind they set an 8 year goal in 1961. They were ahead of schedule, and then they had to turn off the rocket, drive cars, play golf, launch back up, and perfectly synchronize to go from 0 miles per hour to a spacecraft going 3,000 miles per hour, okay, with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, then come back to Earth. They were ahead of schedule within an 8 year goal. Now, the picture on the lower right, with 6 decades better technology, they are 8 years behind schedule just to loop around the moon and look at it out the window, right?
Hmm.
So they can go from one astronaut in space and within 8 years drive cars on the moon, but 60 years later, after putting 350 astronauts in space, They're 8 years behind schedule just to look at the window at the moon going by. Okay, so there we've proven it logically. You cannot have greater technology in the past and in the future, which means they didn't go to the moon, which means they lied, they bluffed, like in poker, right? You have crap, but you pretend you've got a good hand, and that placated the American people at the time. Who knew it would be so long for them to be able to return to the moon, and they still can't do it. Artemis, if they actually left Earth orbit, which I'm beginning to have my doubts about, then they're still only doing 1/5 of what they claim to have done on the first attempt with 6 decades older technology. There's never been a scientific breakthrough like flying across the Atlantic or splitting the atom into an atomic bomb or breaking the sound barrier that no nation on Earth could repeat it 50 years later. But that's what we have. No nation on Earth can repeat driving cars and playing golf on the moon, which was so easy to be able to be done on the first attempt ahead of schedule with 1 millionth computing power cell phone. And for some strange reason, with 6 decades better technology, you can only look out the window at the moon going by, right? So you can't have greater technology in the past, which means they faked the original moon landing claim. That's what's key about Artemis. If the Apollo missions were real, that means they've left Earth orbit 9 times before. So I don't think there would be all of this publicity going on if they were covering going to the South Pole for the 10th time, would there? Do you really think
Yeah,
there'd be all this talk if they had genuinely been to the South Pole 9 times and they're going to go for the 10th time? Do you think that would be that big of a deal?
not at
Or,
all.
or even, or what about this? To not even go to the South Pole, but to fly over it in an airplane. Would that be a big deal if they really were at the South Pole walking on the ground 9 times prior? So what's the big deal about leaving Earth orbit? It because if they actually did it, then it would be the first time they actually did it. The problem is there's not a single video, motion video, going past the astronauts in the cabin to the window and seeing the really close up moon slowly going by. Not a single video for $100 billion, which is already 40% of what Apollo cost. 40% of what Apollo cost just to launch people one time and not even land on the moon. So, why aren't there videos going past the astronauts in the cabin to the window and saying, look, you see, it's right outside the window. All we have are a few still images, which an AI just said were fake. Not only does it say that picture on the lower left is fake, it said the Earthrise picture from Artemis is fake. That's what the AI said with 95% certainty. It is fake. Okay. So let's go to that picture while I'm sharing my screen. Uh, this is the one that proves they didn't go to the moon. You can prove that the moon missions are fake with one photograph. On the left is the way that sunlight casts shadows. The sun is about 1 million times bigger than the Earth. It's 93 million miles away. It's going to cast shadows in the same direction over the entire Earth or moon. Go outside, look at 2 trees, 2 telephone poles, 2 people standing in your parking lot at lunch break on a cloudless day. The shadows of you and your friend, or 2 trees, or whatever, will always run parallel. It's impossible scientifically and mathematically for shadows to intersect if they're taken in sunlight. Over on the right is a picture they claim was from the last mission to the moon, where an astronaut shadow is at 12 o'clock and a rock about 5 feet away is at 9 o'clock. That's a 90-degree difference from objects 5 feet apart, meaning that is a really close electrical light, which means they're on Earth, which means they didn't go to the moon. It's amazing. This is undeniable proof that the moon missions were fake, plus the logic that you can't have greater technology in the past and in the future. Never happened in the history of mankind. And yet, people deny it anyway. Why is that? Because they've made a god out of the moon landing. The problem is the science's messiah, AI, just said the moon pictures were fake. What are they going to
Right.
do about that? And that story they're really trying to suppress. And I did a screenshot of a warning. It says if you proceed to the original Russian article about Vladimir Putin being at the AI conference, being shown that the AI says the Apollo pictures are fake, all the while it said the Chinese pictures of the lunar surface from unmanned probes were real. It says all the data on your computer will be stolen and you'll be associated with child pornography. That's how
Wow.
desperate they are to hide the fact that the smartest AI in the world, that's my dog over here, just said that the
Wow.
moon pictures were fake. And then, and I'm not sure how good your audio is going to be, but we'll skip ahead to, let's see, which one here? Let's go to this clip here. I'll turn my microphone toward my speakers, and I don't know if you'll be able to hear this or not, but he's talking about a radiation field that surrounds the Earth and the upper atmosphere. Most people don't know it exists. It's called the Van Allen radiation belt. It's about 1,000 miles above the Earth. So, Skylab, the space shuttle, Gemini, Mercury, all of that was well below the radiation, except going to the moon, Apollo or Artemis, you'd have to go through it. It's 30,000 miles thick. You'd be in it at Artemis's speed, about 2 hours to the moon and 2 hours back. According to the guy who discovered them, it's 250 times a lethal dose. I'm going to see if you can hear this audio. It's of a
Okay.
NASA engineer saying that the technology necessary to go through that radiation, at least as of 2014 when he said this, has not been invented yet.
My name is Kelly Smith, and I work on navigation and guidance for Orion. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Okay, so I presume you can hear that audio. Is that right?
Yeah, we can hear that clear. Oh yeah.
Okay, good. Too loud or just right?
It was just right. It was
Okay,
just
good.
right.
Okay, so he says that the radiation is lethal and the technology to go through it has not been invented yet. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space, okay? Well, that means number one, the radiation challenge, at least as of at least 2014, has not been resolved yet, okay? The technology to go through it and survive as of 2014 has not been invented yet, and you must invent such a technology before you send people through this region of space, which means they did not go to the moon in 1969. You see that? He
Yep.
just admitted they did not go to the moon in 1969 because you must solve these radiation challenges before we send people through this region of space. And he's saying in 2014 they haven't solved the problem yet. So, how did Artemis claim that they solved the radiation issue? They said they put their cargo of their clothing and food and water between them and the walls of the spacecraft, and that shielded them from the deadly radiation. Now, I don't know about you there, Bro Sanchez, but when I get x ray from the dentist, the
Hmm.
x ray is 1/5000th as strong as the radiation belt. And instead of lasting 2 hours, it only lasts 1/24th of a second. And my dentist wears a lead vest, not, clothing and food and water. If you go to Sibrel.com, I'm going to go ahead and bring it up here. This is my website. And you scroll down to the article. Here's like the book I wrote about it. It's an audio, Kindle, or print. It's interactive. There are, I think, about 15 video links associated with it. So you read a chapter. I say go to link one, link two, link three. All of this backs up what I've said. There's the link with Kelly Smith in it saying there's a problem with the radiation. And here's another book I wrote about aliens. There may fake an alien invasion. Here's a children's book called The Great Earth Hoax about the moon people faking a trip to Earth under the direction of Dr. Von Wrong. And here's some interviews I've done with Candace and Joe Rogan and so forth. Here's a new article about Artemis. Here's the article about the AI, and we have a video to back that up. And here's the radiation. This is Van Allen, the guy who discovered them. He says our measurements show that the maximum radiation level as of 1958, they sent probes into it with Geiger counters. He says it's an equivalent to between 10 and 100 roentgens per hour, depending on the still undetermined proportions of protons to electrons. Since a human being exposed for 2 days to 10 roentgens, that's over the course of 2 days, would have only a 50% chance of survival, meaning it's going to likely kill you. The radiation belts obviously present an obstacle to spaceflight. Okay, so 10 to 100 roentgens per hour averages to 50 per hour. At the claimed speed of the Apollo craft, that would be 2 hours in the radiation to the moon and 2 hours back, which is 200 roentgens. Since 10 over 2 days will kill you, which is 0.2 per hour, the radiation belts are 250 times a lethal dose. So why are we not seeing a video going past the crew to the window with the moon going by outside? That's the money shot. That's the shot that proves you're there, not still pictures, right? Go to my YouTube channel. The link's at the bottom of my website here. And it shows you that a current AI said that their Earthrise picture is fake. So that's one problem. And then here's another clip. If you want to show a clip, seeing how we got good audio. Here's a NASA engineer. He's a consultant for NASA. And he says he just assumed the Apollo spacecraft had enough rocket fuel to leave Earth orbit, but it actually did not. And that to, quote, return to the moon, it's going to take 30 times more fuel than the Apollo rocket. Here's a scientist saying so himself. And he opens up with saying what he's about to say is politically incorrect, and you may no longer work for NASA if you say it.
But the more I started digging into Artemis, the more I realized there might be some issues. If you say certain things, this might change your relationship with NASA forever. You know what? This is the truth, and this is what needs to be said.
I did not understand, in order to get the human lander to the moon, we have to launch a bunch of additional rockets to tank up in low Earth orbit. And this is how many rockets it's going to take to fuel up that thing to get it to the moon. I've done the math. If you had any questions.
And there you go. Elon Musk just said the same thing. If his rocket is fully loaded, it carries twice the fuel of Apollo. And he says it's going to take 15 of those launches, or 30 times the fuel, in order to go to the moon. So the Apollo rocket did not have enough fuel to leave Earth orbit. The Artemis rocket only had 15% more fuel than the Apollo rocket, and it allegedly coasted with inertia to loop around the moon. Do you see? So it has 15% more fuel to just do 1/5 of what Apollo claimed to have done. So that doesn't add up. And then we discovered footage, and I'm sure you've seen it, of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes. And we're going to show that clip. This is what convinced me that they did not go to the moon. And all of NASA's documentaries, they claim that this is the Earth floating in space, right? You're about to hear Neil Armstrong lie, and he's going to say we're calling in from about 130,000 miles out or halfway to the moon. He says they only have one window that faces the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera, meaning the lens of the camera would have to be right up against the window in order to shoot this little blue Earth floating in space, if indeed that's what it is. This is actually the circular window of the spacecraft. The camera's at the back of the spacecraft. They've turned out all the lights, and they've inserted a little crescent piece of material into the window to make it look like the Terminator line between night and day. And they're faking being halfway to the moon. As you'll see, we have the unedited version that says do not show to the public at the beginning of it. And let's go ahead and take a listen.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Okay, so he just lied. That's not 130,000 miles out. This is the unedited reel that we have that says do not show to the public. There they are. That's Buzz Aldrin removing the effect in front of the window, proving that's a 1 foot model of the Earth, not the Earth floating in space. The lights come up, they open the iris, and you see the real location of the camera, which is at the back of the spacecraft, and they're in Earth orbit with the bright reflective Earth outside the window. So we just proved that they are faking being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit. And if that weren't enough, we have another unedited reel. And this is of them. Let me close that window. You're going to hear the CIA on a third track of audio telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay. They're actually in Earth orbit, which is only about 250 miles above the Earth. So the conversations would be instantaneous. Like, hey, bro, how's it going? Hey, fine, Bart, how are you? Doing pretty good. How about you? Doing fine. So that would give away the fact that they're close to the Earth. So they calculated if they really were halfway to the moon, about 2 seconds for the radio signal to go out and be processed, another 2 seconds for it to come back. Again, this is not the Earth floating in space. This is a circular window of the spacecraft that's filled up with the Earth in low Earth orbit. So you're going to hear NASA say something, and then the CIA is going to count off 4 seconds in a private earpiece that Neil Armstrong has, and then you're going to hear them say, talk. And then he speaks after the fake 4 second radio delay.
Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone, 1015, PD, look great, over. Sure. Okay, Roger.
And you can hear that one more time if you want.
Yeah, just play it one more time for him. I heard it clear. He said talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, y'all.
Oh, Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone, 1015, PD, look great, over. Sure. Okay, Roger.
So he says he's zooming in on Earth when in fact he's zooming in on the circular window from the back of the spacecraft. He lied about being halfway to the moon, and he lied about where the camera actually is, because we just show them in this clip faking being halfway to the moon, and he's claiming to be 130,000 miles out, when in fact we have the unedited version, and they break down the model right there. That's actually the window. There's Buzz Aldrin breaking down part of the visual effect they have in front of it. That's a work light in the top left. And they open the iris and bring up the lights, and you see that it was really a 1 foot model of the Earth, cleverly using the circular window, turning off the lights, having the camera at the back, and making it appear as the Earth floating in space, when in fact it's actually the window of the spacecraft. So we have them faking being halfway to the moon. So if they're faking being halfway to the moon, it's because they can't go halfway to the moon. And if you can't go halfway, you certainly can't go all the way, and that proves the Apollo equipment never left Earth orbit. Again, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I said, well, maybe they faked the first one, got their act together. But this picture on the right is from the last mission to the moon, where the shadows are intersecting at 90 degrees, proving it's electrical lighting. So if your Volkswagen Bug can't do 200 miles per hour, none of them can. None of the Apollo equipment could leave Earth orbit because we have them faking being beyond Earth orbit. And that's why Artemis was such a big deal. If they left Earth orbit. But even if they did, you can't have greater technology in the past. You can't drive cars on the first attempt ahead of schedule and be 8 years behind schedule with 6 decades better technology that for some reason you can only look out the window at the moon going by and not even land, right?
Right.
If they go from that kite airplane to a jet in 49 years, that if they could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, we would have been on Mars 10 years later. We'd be in another solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon. But they had to leave Earth orbit. We have the 60th anniversary of walking on the moon coming up. And if they can't leave Earth orbit, they're in big trouble. So they had to leave Earth orbit, either do it or fake it. And because there's no video of them going past the crew to the window, showing the close up moon right outside the window, slowly going by, you would think they would want that.
Mm-hmm.
When they rolled back the launch in March and said, we're going to have to postpone it 2 weeks, I said, oh, here we go. They're going to postpone it to April Fool's Day. Now, I don't know much about the Illuminati, and I'm not sure I want to, but April 1st, they say, you know, the truth is hidden in plain sight. And Apollo, if you go to Revelation 9:11, it's a name for Lucifer, Apollo. And so we have a lot of strange things. Here's an interesting clip of astronauts saying on 3 different occasions, this will be the first time they leave Earth orbit and the first time they attempt to go to the moon.
It's going to be an odd answer. It might land wrong, but I'm going to try anyway. This is the first time we're going to send humans to the moon. This is the first time we're going to send humans to the moon.
And this is really the beginning of human beings leaving low Earth orbit.
The moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Okay, eventually go to the moon, the beginning of leaving Earth orbit. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
And if that wasn't enough, okay, so here's the 4 proofs. We have the logic. You cannot have greater technology in the past and in the future. We have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees, which proves it's electrical lighting, which proves they're on Earth, which proves they didn't go to the moon. We have them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes, right? Claiming this is the Earth floating in space, but in the unedited reel I was given, it's actually a 1-foot model with the 3rd track of audio of the CIA telling them to fake a 4-second radio delay. And if that's not enough, we have a deathbed confession of an eyewitness who was actually there when they filmed the fake moon landing. The photograph you're looking at is of the gentleman by the name of Cyrus Eugene Akers. He was chief of security at the Air Force's most secure base, where their intelligence, CIA special ops type of events were taking place, which is Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico. As he was dying, fearing the judgment of God, and I was just reading in the Bible today about how if you confess your sins and forsake them, meaning don't do them again, you're forgiven. So the guy's about to meet his maker, and he says, I want to confess something. The first thing he says, bro, is that I'm a murderer, is what he said. I killed somebody back in 1968. His son is there, and that's the person who we're going to hear from in this video. He was there at his father's deathbed confession. He said, who did you kill? And he said, a coworker at Cannon Air Force Base. And here's a shot of the base, and it says, you know, Special Operations Headquarters. And the military police come in to investigate to give the family of the victim closure. Who did you kill? Where did you bury him? Maybe they said he disappeared or died in an accident or who knows what. And then the military police asked him, why? Why did you kill him? And he said, well, we've both eyewitnessed filming the fake moon landing there on a lunar set constructed in an airplane hangar. And my friend thought it was morally wrong, and he was going to tell the public, and I killed him to keep it a secret. He even said that President Johnson was there the first of 3 days of filming and gave him a list of 15 people who were allowed in to observe. I got that list. I published it in my book. Some of those people are still alive. Listen to this guy talk about it. It's a summary. It lasts about 30 seconds long.
This is the story that my dad told me on his deathbed. In Cannon Air Force Base in 1968, he said by the time he got there, that there was already 2 large hangars that were connected to make it look like a lunar landscape. Inside the staging area the lunar lander. All of the walls were painted flat black. And when Dad saw the moon landing on TV, he cried. He said he knew that what he had witnessed on TV was exactly what they recorded in that hangar.
And there you go. Shadows intersecting at 90 degrees, footage of them faking being halfway to the moon, the logic that you can't have greater technology in the past and in the future, and an eyewitness. And courts consider a deathbed confession twice as powerful as one coming from a living person. And that's what they did. Another strange kind of anomaly about the whole moon landing is they spent what in today's dollars would be $250 billion to build this remarkable equipment that went to the moon on the very first attempt with 1 millionth computing power of a cell phone. And then afterwards, they took all of the equipment and the diagrams and the schematics and they threw it into the furnace. Also, the original videotapes, also the original telemetry data as to where the rocket was. Here's a NASA astronaut admitting so.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Okay, they intentionally destroyed the marvelous moon landing on the first attempt technology. Now, why would they do that? That's never happened in the history of the world. There's never been a breakthrough like flying across the Atlantic in an airplane. He flew across the Atlantic in an airplane, Lindbergh, in 1927. Imagine 57 years later in 1984, no airplanes could fly across the Atlantic in the entire world. And instead of being able to fly 3,000 miles, they can only fly 3 miles because apparently they can only send people 1,000th the distance to the moon, at least prior to a couple of weeks ago, and that claim looks like it was falsified. It's also never happened. Not only a breakthrough technology, breaking the sound barrier, splitting the atom, that no one could repeat 50 years later, which is part of scientific formula for verifying the authenticity of a scientific claim. It says it has to be independently duplicated in order for science to consider it real. And they're ignoring that fact. They're ignoring shadows intersecting at 90 degrees. They're ignoring that it's never happened in the history of the world that a breakthrough technology was intentionally destroyed. Maybe the atomic bomb you might want to destroy, right? You killed hundreds of thousands of people to end the war, but let's just never go there again. Let's dismantle that, burn everything up. But just 10 years later, atomic bombs are 1,000 times more powerful. So, again, if they could go to the moon on the first attempt, right? We would have been on Mars 10 years later. We'd be in another solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon. Elon Musk just canceled all of his plans to go to Mars because he says we need to practice first by going to the moon. But I thought you were there 6 times. Why would you need to do a practice 7 times going backwards in technology? Because they never went the first time. And if all that weren't bad enough, it'd be one thing, Bruce Sanchez, if they faked the moon landing and killed nobody. Maybe the devious part of me would kind of respect their ingenuity and shrewdness. But the fact is, and I'm going to share an image here of someone I interviewed for 4 hours. This is Betty Grissom. She is the widow of the gentleman on the left there, immediately to her right. This is her husband, Virgil Grissom. I interviewed her for 4 hours. This is why my book, Moon Man at Sibrel.com, is key because it has a lot of information that's not in the movie, including the deathbed confession of Cyrus Eugene Akers and my interview, which she preferred was released after her death. So I published that interview in the book. She told me that her husband, the gentleman to her right, was a whistleblower during the Apollo program. He was preparing congressional reports saying that they were 10 years away from going to the moon, not 2, as they promised in 1967. He was so furious that they wouldn't fix anything because they knew they were only going to orbit the Earth and hadn't yet told the astronauts of the plan to fake the moon landing. He was so furious, without permission, he took a bunch of reporters to the top of the rocket and affixed a lemon the size of a grapefruit, calling the moon rocket a piece of junk on national TV. Days later, he's murdered. He was under Secret Service protection the day he died. His widow, who I interviewed for 4 hours, said on January 26, 1967, he telephoned her from NASA and said, "Hon, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad today inspecting the equipment. I've been here for 8 years," he said. "I've never seen the CIA at NASA one time. Why did they show up today?" The very next day, he's dead from faulty equipment. After he was put under Secret Service protection because he personally received death threats from generals in the Pentagon for telling the public that the moon rocket was a piece of junk. So not only did they use our labor, our sweat, 25% of our income, to give us a fake moon landing, they used it to pay the salaries of CIA agents who murdered our brethren who were trying to expose their crimes. This is the federal government and the world that we live in. So I'll stop sharing my screen now and we can get back to an important conversation about what does this mean? It means, we live in an extremely fallen world with an extremely fallen humanity and federal government. You know, the faking of the moon landing is so much more significant historically than if they had actually gone. Do you see that, bro? Either they went, planted a flag, came back, even though they can't do it with 6 decades better technology, or the most powerful nation on earth that hypocritically claims to represent truth and justice faked mankind's greatest accomplishment and murdered their own people to cover it up. If that's true, and I assure you it is, that's so much more profound historically than if they'd actually gone. So, one of the greatest events in human history is the faking of the moon landing. And if the truth does not come out, if the truth sets us free, then lies make us slaves. And there are people in the federal government who know it was fake and they're afraid to come forward out of pride. Well, we'll look bad. Most of the world, except Americans, already knows that the moon missions were fake. And we're only making ourselves look bad by putting it off. We can blame the people in the past. We can give an amnesty to all those who are alive, but we have to tell the truth about it or the evil people win. And they're still in power running the show. People say they want to reform the government, but they're not using the most powerful tool at their disposal to do so, which is to tell the public they were taken for suckers 6 times and salaries were paid to the CIA to kill people who weren't cooperate with the moon landing fraud. And that's the fact. That's the world we live in. And when I popped in that tape and I saw them faking being halfway to the moon, I quietly wept. I'm like, wow, they actually did fake the moon landing. How sad is that? And it really shows you that our leaders are juvenile. They set a goal. Kennedy's not a scientist, he's a visionary. Hey, let's go to the moon before the end of the decade. They wouldn't eat humble pie. They wouldn't admit they set a goal they couldn't achieve. So Johnson was was going to run for reelection until he found out the faking of the moon landing would be in the next term. He was afraid they might get caught. Do you realize it's only happened once before in the history of America where an incumbent didn't run for reelection for president because he knew they were going to fake the moon landing in the next term. And what if you got caught? Whoa. So he passes that on to Nixon. But this shows you if you have a Democrat there for the filming and a Republican giving it the thumbs up, that's another illusion as well. Robert McNamara was defense secretary during Johnson's administration, and the public was against the Vietnam War. So he said before he died, the whole reason they started the war was a fabricated attack on an American ship by a North Vietnamese ship in the Gulf of Tonkin. And by the way, it actually never happened. Me and the CIA made it up. Congress passed a law based on a CIA fabrication. Did Congress vote to fake the moon landing? No. Congress is being manipulated by the CIA. So how can we have representatives? How can we have a democracy when 300 million Americans wanted GMO labeling and one person vetoed it? That's not a democracy. And I don't know who's running the show, but it's not Republicans or Democrats, because both of them conspired to fake the moon landing. And until the truth comes out, the world is going to get worse instead of better.
Awesome stuff, Bart. I want to thank you for your time. This is just so awesome. I do have a question for you. I know you got to get out of here. When people ask you this question, why would they lie? What's the incentive do they have to fake all of this?
Well, you could say that pride seems to be the number one reason. They set a goal they couldn't achieve, and they were too embarrassed to admit that. So pride comes before a fall. Pride prevents people from seeing the truth. The scientists are so proud that they say we went to the moon, that even if an Apollo astronaut went on national TV and said the missions were fake, they'd still think they went anyway. That's pride. And then they made a lot of money off of it. $250 billion. And if you're really not going to the moon, you can probably keep 80% of that just to orbit the Earth. And they went into Cambodia and they went into Laos against congressional approval. They got the money to do that from somewhere. But if it really boils down to the core reason, it's the same reason President Clinton gave as to why he had an affair, which, by the way, he denied 20 times first. When asked why did he do it, he said, because I could. Because I could get away with it. Why did they fake the moon landing? Because they could. They already killed Kennedy in broad daylight. His own relative says with 100% certainty the CIA killed their own president. So they're killing their own president. They're starting a war that killed 58,220 of their own soldiers without reason. So don't think they're going to have a problem faking a TV image of the moon. It's just that it's a positive lie that people don't want to give up. Their team won the Super Bowl. How dare you say we cheated? But don't you want to know if your heroes are really traitors? They gave these guys high salaries, they gave them ticker tape parades, and they gave them medals of honor for being such good liars. And one of these guys claims to be a Christian, so you must believe what he says. That's the scariest of them all. And they did not go to the moon. And so, as long as they're claiming that they did, those gangsters are still running the show. So, the truth has to come out, or America and mankind is doomed. I can just say, pray for the truth to come out. If we're living in the last days, what better warning from God to mankind than to show that the moon missions were fake, to show us how bad it has gotten? You know, it's like Glenn Beck is offended by me saying we didn't go to the moon, because in his mind, I know it's gotten bad, but at least we went to the moon. And really the same with Alex Jones, bless his heart. He's uncovered an enormous amount of corruption. And if the guy's only right 1 out of 4 times, we're in deep trouble. And he has a hard time because his uncle worked for NASA. You know, that's one of the reasons they say it must be real. You can't fool hundreds of thousands of people, but you can. The atomic bomb involved 129,500 people, and only 8 people knew what they were building. I talked to the flight director, Eugene Krantz. He says someone in the command center cannot tell the difference between a quote real flight and a quote practice flight. It's just a bunch of numbers going by on a screen. And just because Bank of America has 400,000 tellers, what a bank teller knows about corruption in the bank and what the CEO knows is completely different. There's only 3 eyewitnesses to each alleged event, no independent press coverage, and for some reason, all the Apollo astronauts had top secret clearance. Strange thing, don't you think? And then they say, well, Russia or China would have, spilled the beans, but not true. A shrewder thing would be to blackmail us. And I know someone who works in the Chinese Space Agency. who says that's exactly what's going on. Everybody there knows the moon missions are fake. They're blackmailing NASA for space technology that Congress forbid them to receive. They're getting it under the table for not exposing the moon landing fraud. So these are the facts. And, all that they have is this tiny, fuzzy picture of a dot on the lunar surface. And I could show it if you want to see. It's kind of comical.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
share my screen one more time.
Okay.
Desktop share. And here we are. This is the best evidence on the left in 1969 that they're really on the moon, when an eyewitness says that was actually Cannon Air Force Base. And on the right is the best evidence that they have that the moon missions are real. This is from an Indian probe of the Apollo 11 landing site, assuming the picture is real. It's 1 foot per pixel. The problem is, whatever's there is 1/3 smaller than the Apollo lander, and it has 3 legs when the Apollo lander had 4. 3 is a better design to land on an uneven surface. So apparently they put a probe there to simulate transmissions coming from the moon, and that's what we're seeing. So it's amazing, isn't it? That's the best proof that the moon landings are real, is that picture on the right. Does that convince you?
Not at all.
When in fact it's actually 1/3 smaller than the Apollo lander and has 3 legs instead of 4. So it's actually proof of the fraud. So, I don't know what to say. I wish the moon landings were real. Our world would be a better place. But you have to face facts. If you have cancer, you need to deal with it. And this is a cancer on America. You can't have a federal government so out of control that they're murdering their own president, murdering their own soldiers, faking moon landings, murdering people to cover it up. Even that guy in the deathbed testimony from the Sun, he was threatened with death, and his family 4 years ago, for talking to me about his father's participation in the moon landing fraud. CIA agents showed up at the guy's house and threatened to kill him 4 years ago. The White House was involved. The United States Senate Intelligence Committee was involved, and the regional FBI, to give the guy Secret Service protection. This is 4 years ago. Funny thing to be doing if they really went to the moon, right? The guy confirmed everything. My dad was chief of security. I lived right across the street from Cannon Air Force Base, and several people on that list that his father saved as a souvenir wrote in their memoirs they were at Cannon Air Force Base on those dates. So that's where they filmed the first one. And we know from the shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from the alleged last mission, they just kept milking money from the public and gave them a lie they wanted to believe. That's the problem with flattery. People say we're orbiting the moon. We won the Super Bowl when they weren't even in the stadium, you know? And to think
Yeah.
a guy, like Alex Jones' uncle, who was equivalent of selling popcorn during the Super Bowls, can somehow, at that level, know whether the game is fixed or not. You have no clue, especially if someone in the command center can't tell the difference between a real flight or a fake flight. How could he, years later? So.
Bart, this was awesome. I'm gonna call it a power hour. I want everyone in the chat room to follow Bart. He has a YouTube channel. I got the link to that. I got the link to his website there. Get the book, guys, and read the book. Check him out. This guy's been doing this stuff a long time. I don't think there's no one else better qualified to speak on the moon missions as far as thoroughly debunking it. So I appreciate your time, Bart. I'm gonna let you get out of here, and I look forward to another bill with you.
All righty, Bro Sanchez, you take care. Godspeed.
You too. Thank you. Tonight's conversation, whether you agreed with it or not, is exactly what this platform is about. We just heard a full breakdown from Bart Sibrel on why he believes Artemis II doesn't add up. Some of you are convinced, some of you completely reject it. And that's the point, because at the end of the day, it isn't about blind belief in one direction or the other. It's about being willing to examine what you're being shown. We're talking about institutions like NASA, massive budgets, historic claims, and visuals that are shaping how billions of people understand reality itself. So the real question isn't just, is it real or is it fake? The real question is, are you willing to look deeper? Do you question everything? Are you willing to question what doesn't make sense? Are you comfortable accepting the official story as it's given? That's something every single one of you has to decide for yourself. If you made it this far, though, hit the like button, subscribe. If you haven't already, hit the notification and sub button. Share this stream with someone who needs to hear both sides of this conversation. If you miss any part of tonight's show, go back, rewatch it, and come to your own conclusion. We'll be back next stream opening the lines up, especially for those who disagree. Bring your best arguments. Until the end, stay sharp, stay questioning, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace and love.